uh, business people, students, they like to put Baybayin in a lot of places, including tattoos. It's on their bodies, it's on their shirts, it's on billboards, it's downstairs at the Philippine stand, etc. But very few Filipinos can read it. So basically, it's used as decoration, as an aesthetic element, as something that gives style. It's something that communicates that, hey, Filipinos have their own script, like the Koreans, like the Thai, like the Chinese, like the Japanese, etc., etc. But the big contradiction is we do have our own native scripts, but very, very few Filipinos can actually read it. And that's so that's what it says. It says Aklat Pilipinas. Aklat means book. Pilipinas is the name of our country. So this brings me to the big Baybayin dilemma. It's visible, you see it everywhere, but it's rarely read because literacy in Baybayin is in the Philippines is almost zero. And that's what I'm trying to help correct. Okay, I saw this on the back of one of the delegates here. Uh, Again, this is embroidered. It says, Mu ki ka tig bak. It's the name of a poet. That's on the back of her beautiful dress. And she's one of the presenters here. She's got it on her back. I don't think she can read it either. All right, across the street, there is a Palestine solidarity camp across the street from the book fair. And I was strolling through it and just very curious. And then there's this whiteboard there, and ask people to write their messages to the people of Gaza. And I wrote something in Baybayin. And almost immediately, a young woman approached me because she recognized it. She couldn't read what it meant. She wanted to know what it said. There she is, Marlisa. Hello. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to show your picture right now. Yeah, okay. So I explained to her that it says, Mabuhay kayo, which means long live. Long live the people of Gaza. And she asked that I write her name. And she happens to be right there. Surprise, Marlisa. Hello. Thank you for coming. I didn't expect her to be here. I just met her yesterday. Yeah, so okay. Um, so that's her name in Baybayin, and that's what I do. To, I don't like scolding or giving sermons to people and reminding people of our deficiencies as a culture. So what I do is I ask people, have you ever seen your name in Baybayin? And if not, and they usually want to see their name in Baybayin, I always carry around Post-it and a calligraphy pen, and I'll write their names in Baybayin. And immediately, you'll see joy on people's faces. So Baybayin has enabled me to give joy in such a quick and easy way without spending any money. I mean, that's what Baybayin gives to me. It's enabled me to connect to people, to make friends, and just for that, it's been worthwhile. So, but sometimes I'm asked, especially by older people, why Baybayin? In fact, I recall I was at a dinner hosted by one of our most prominent writers. And he said very loudly, I mean, he's in a good-natured way. He was kind of teasing me. He said, loud enough for everyone at the dinner to hear, he said, Howie, why are you so interested in Baybayin? It's irrelevant. And all the other guests at the dinner looked at me aghast, like as if I was going to be offended. But I'm not offended by that because it's quite typical. I hear that quite a bit. And to me, it's actually a learning moment. Since he opened the floodgates, I explained to him, within earshot of everybody else, why it's relevant. So I'm going to be discussing in the next couple of minutes why why I think all Filipinos at least, and all Filipinos in the diaspora, and anyone who's interested in writing systems can learn Baybayin. Well, first of all, it's ours. It's our native writing. Just for that, I think we should learn Baybayin. But there are other reasons. It's our inheritance. It's our inheritance. When we think of inheritance, we often think of something of monetary value, something of a physical object. But this is just as much our inheritance as anything else. This picture is at my house, and I often host people interested to learn, and we have little workshops, sometimes over beer and nothing formal, but it's our way of spreading knowledge about Baybayin. This is in my house in Batangas. So our national museum's logo is Pa for Pamana. And I'm actually going to give a talk at the National Museum when I get back to the Philippines, because very few of the staff actually can read Baybayin, even if it's in their logo. So another reason for learning Baybayin is we need to pass it on. If you don't pass on an inheritance, it's going to disappear. So this is a photo of my son on the left and his cousin on the right, and they're practicing Baybayin at our house. This was years ago when they were still teenagers. My son is now 23. All right. And a couple of Father's Days ago, my son gave me this. And he wrote in Baybayin, Maging mabuting ninuno, which is the family motto, be a good ancestor. He wrote it in Baybayin just to show that he still remembers what I taught him. So to me, Baybayin is also a way to bond with other people. Bond with them, not just over this writing system, but over discussions about heritage, why pre-colonial history is important, why our native scripts, our native languages are important. So this again is at our house, but this is in my office. So I do the same thing for my colleagues. So during our breaks, during lunchtime, we get together instead of just sitting around chit-chatting. We're talking about a pre-colonial script. And during the pandemic, of course, everything moved online, including things like sharing about Baybayin. So I did a lot of Baybayin on Zoom. And the big advantage of doing something, moving your sharing over Zoom, is that you can be connecting to people all over the world, as opposed to having to face somebody like here. Everybody has to be in the same place. Of course, we all know that. And up to now, I still give a lot of lessons to people on Zoom, especially students overseas. It's been a reason for me to forge a lot of friendships. And actually, as I age, I'm also getting forgetful. So when I write somebody's name on Post-it, it helps me remember their names. And these are a couple of other young ladies I met at the park yesterday, and I also wrote their names in Baybayin, and I think a couple of them are here as well. So to me, it's a form of service. So if you teach your pre-colonial script to others, it's a form of service. It's a form of service to your culture, to your heritage. Because I never get paid for doing this. It's not my job. I'm already paid as a journalist. So to maintain my mental health, this is what I do to maintain my mental health. To me, that's enough reward. So it's really more of a vocation than anything professional. Baybayin can make you smarter. Because as we know, learning a new language can keep your intellect, can keep your brain nimble and sharp. But when people think of learning a new language, they usually think of spoken language. They don't think of new writing systems. And actually, learning a new writing system may even be harder than learning a new spoken language. It can be a secret code. So I write in my journal every day, and sometimes in an airplane, when you're writing economy, the next person is right next to you, and sometimes they're curious about what you're writing in a journal, and I switch to Baybayin, and that person quickly loses interest. It's a cultural resource. I label all my trees. On my house, I plant, on my property, I plant a lot of native trees because my wife and I created a native tree sanctuary, and we've labeled most of our trees three ways. Uh, the common name of the tree in Roman writing system, and the common name in Baybayin, and then the botanical name at the bottom in the Roman writing system as well. So this is an anahaw tree. That's molave, like the molave, talisay. All right. Another reason for learning Baybayin, it's easy. It's easy. Other Asian syllabaries, you have to memorize, thousands of characters. Baybayin, you only need to memorize 18. And then the rules are very simple. There are no silent letters. You spell according to pronunciation. There's nothing complicated about it. Another reason for learning Baybayin is it's everywhere. But if you don't know, if you can't read it, it might as well be nowhere. So, for example, this is a tricycle driver. For those who have been to the Philippines, tricycles are it's basically a motorcycle with a sidecar, and it's a common public transportation. And I saw this shortly before I left for Germany, a tricycle driver with Baybayin on his back. And it simply says, Pilipinas. It's in government logos, as I mentioned. This is the insignia of our military. This is the National Library, and there's Baybayin there at the bottom. And that means karunungan or knowledge. Baybayin is on our money. A lot of Filipinos don't know that. It's on our money. There it is. It's used as a watermark. So you have to hold it up to a light to see it clearly. But basically, it says Filipino. Filipino. It's even on our coins. That says P. That's the character for P. P-I, for Filipino. It's on Philippine passports. A lot of Filipinos don't know that. And I tell Filipinos, you need to know at least the Baybayin in your passports, because if a suspicious immigration officer in another country sees it and asks you what it means, what are you going to say? Well, you could say, I don't know, and they might doubt your identity as a Filipino, like you're posing as a Filipino, because he might think, what Filipino doesn't know his own script? Right? Or the most likely scenario, if you can't read Baybayin, is you're going to invent something, which is perjury. So just for the Philippine passport holders, so it's on every odd numbered page in the passport. Next time you're holding your passport, check, you'll see it. And that's what it says. Ang katwiran ay nagpapadakila sa isang bayan. Reason can elevate a nation. So if the immigration officer asks you and you explain this to him, he'll probably say, come on right in. It's on city signs. I think the author of Trece is here. I mean, this is a billboard. And the graphic novel, and it was turned into a Netflix animated film, used a lot of Baybayin, but mostly, I think, for aesthetics. It's on street art. It's on Barong Tagalog, our formal dress for males. And that says, Pag-ibig sa tinubuong lupa, which is the title of a poem by Andres Bonifacio. It's on pastries. So this bottom says, ang punot dulo ng lahat ay pag-ibig. The start and end of everything is love. It's on bodies. You see it on tattoos that says diwa, spirit, that says tiwala, trust. Sometimes, because people in the Philippines know that I'm a practitioner of Baybayin, they will send me pictures of their tattoos, kind of flex, hey, I have Baybayin on my body, I've tattooed on my body. And so one day I got an image, a picture of somebody's muscular arm with a tattoo here, and I asked him, well, what's the intent? What is it supposed to say? And he said, Pinoy ako. And I told him, I hate to break the news, but it says Pinay ako. It, he didn't know. And probably the tattoo artist was probably trolling him. I don't know. I mean, no, but it's easy to correct because all you need to do is put a kudlit at the bottom. I can explain a few of the mechanics later. So it's not that difficult to correct. But he didn't know all this time and he was flexing it. So the Baybayin challenge is we need to go from decoration to literacy. I mean, we've already established a decoration, right? It's performative. We're performing the fact that we have a script, but we don't know it. So how do we get there? It's not that hard. You just need to be interested and committed. So I can't promise that you're going to learn a lot. You're not going to learn how to write Baybayin at the end of this session. But I'm hoping a few of you, at least a few of you, will be interested enough to teach yourselves or to continue learning until you can read and write it. So I'm going to go over some facts about it. I mean, it's been known as alibata in history. That was a misnomer because previously some scholars thought that Baybayin was rooted in Arabic. And alibata is a composite, it's a coined word based on Arabic words and alphabet. So Baybayin is actually a word that is found in old Tagalog dictionaries. And I tell people, you know, in Tagalog and other Philippine languages, there is a word, a single word for our writing system. I don't know if there's a single word for the Roman writing system that we use you have to say Roman writing. You can't just say Roman. Roman can be anything. So you have to say Roman writing system or Roman script. But Baybayin is a single word that means native writing system. So just a few things to know about Baybayin. It's a syllabary, which means that one character is a syllable. Unlike in Western writing, you need to have a consonant and a vowel to form, or at least English. You need a consonant and a vowel to form a syllable. But in many Asian writing systems, you only need a character to form a syllable. And the Baybayin and other Philippine writing systems are syllabaries. So the default vowel sound is a. It's abakada. So if you've ever studied the Tagalog alphabet, it's abakada. And that's reflected in the writing system. Kudlit signs, basically there's something a little bit larger than dots. You put them at the top, it changes the vowel sound from A to E to E. So it's the same kudlit sign at the top to change the vowel sound to E or E. And at the bottom, if you put a kudlit at the bottom, it changes the vowel sound to O or U. If there's no kudlit, then it remains the default vowel sound A. And then vowel cancelers, for words or syllables that end in consonants, you have to cancel the A at the end. I'm going to show you examples with what we call pamatay patinig, or vowel killers or vowel cancelers. Again, this is a grammatical device or a spelling device that's rooted in Sanskrit. So there's only really one spelling rule in Baybayin. Okay? Kung anong bigkas, siyang baybay. In English, pronunciation is the basis for spelling. That's why we can't have spelling bees in Tagalog, because it's so easy to spell. We don't have silent letters. I mean, I've always wondered, why does receive, the word receive, have 3 E's? What's the point of the E at the end? Why is there an E in the middle? Or why does pneumonia have a P? That never made sense. But you don't have that problem in Baybayin. It's phonetic. All right. I met this woman the other day, about 3 days ago. She took the train from Belgium. She lives in Belgium. Um, she married a Belgian man, and you can't blame people for not knowing much about Philippine culture and history because it's not, generally not taught in other countries. But she said her husband told her that before the Europeans arrived in the Philippines, uh, Filipinos did not know how to read and write. Okay, and she was insisting that no, you're wrong. Filipinos knew how to read and write. So her husband challenged her. Okay, then write my name in your native script, and she couldn't. And then she found me on Instagram, and then messaged me. And then I told her that I'm coming to Frankfurt. And then we arranged to meet up. We arranged to meet up. She came from Belgium, arranged to meet up. I explained to her Baybayin, and I wrote her husband's name in Baybayin. That's her husband's name. Um, so she's going to go home to Belgium and prove to her husband that we do have our native script. But I told her, that's not enough. You have to learn how to write it. Because when you have children, we need to pass this on, all right? So again, it can't be performative. You can't just have somebody else do it and to prove that we have it. You've got to know it in here. I'm not going to say for privacy reasons. I knew someone was going to ask that. I might tell you privately, but no, really, um, yeah, I thought about this hard, whether I was going to show it, but I know that none of you were able to read his name. Oh, you have a translator. That's cheating. I'll tell you later. I don't even know. It's hard to pronounce, actually. I had a hard time, okay. But anyway, this leads me to what's the history of Baybayin, Because her husband was saying when the Europeans arrived, you guys didn't have any writing. You were not literate. But there's a lot of evidence that the island people, there were no we weren't called Filipinos then, right? Philippines is based on the name of a Spanish king, right? So we were not colonized yet when the first Europeans arrived, and that's an example of well, this that's Tagalog royalty. So not all the natives look like that, but um, we were literate people, and the evidence came from the first colonizers and missionaries themselves because they were reporting back to their authorities in Spain what they were finding. And just a few examples. Father Pedro Chirino, who was an early Jesuit priest who was learning about the new Spanish colony, reported back that so accustomed are all these islanders to writing and reading that there is scarcely a man or woman who cannot read and write in the letters proper to the island of Luzon. Luzon is the biggest island in the Philippines. And Morga, in 1609, he was a Spanish lawyer and also a colonial authority. He wrote that throughout the islands, the natives write very well using their letters. All the natives, women as well as men, write in this language, and there are very few who do not write well and correctly. A number of these accounts of literacy in the Philippines in the 17th century emphasize that even women could read and write, which I think tells me that maybe where they came from, a lot of women could not read and write yet. And a lot of other places they were exploring could not read and write. But indigenous Philippine culture is known to be matriarchal, is known to have less gender inequality. A lot of that changed, of course, when we became Catholic. So you may wonder, how come there are very few remnants of pre-colonial writing left? Our ancestors were limited by the available technology. We did not have pen and paper. The islanders did not have could not produce books. There was no printing press, etc., etc. They were writing with bladed tools, mostly on bamboo, sometimes on wood, sometimes on leaves, mostly perishable surfaces, which will decompose over time. This is, by the way, what I'm showing is a Mangyan man. In some places in the Philippines, it's continuous. There are some tribes and ethnic groups in the Philippines. They're quite small, much smaller than Tagalogs or the Ilocanos, etc., who have continued using their script because they were less colonized than people in Manila, for example, who were quick um, to stop using Baybayin and adopt the Roman writing system. All right, in Baybayin there's a lot of visual etymology, uh, and I think it's because the pre-colonial ancestors' world was a natural world, and as the writing system evolved, the shapes of the letters kind of reflected what was in a natural world. All right. For example, I just want to show this example. So this is the character for ba. Okay. This is the character for la. This is the character for ha. So there's an etymology here, right? Uh, ba is also the first two syllables of babae. So it suggests female anatomy. Babae is woman or female in Filipino languages. La is the first two syllables of lalaki, or male or man. So, and this is ha, the first syllable of hangin or wind. So one interpretation of the visual etymology of this word is woman, man, united by the breath of life, and that is the expression of the Creator or humanity, unified by the breath of life. The fact that we have life, the fact that we have community, the fact that we exist is already evidence of God. God is in us. The Supreme Being is in us. He's not somewhere in the sky, behind the clouds, etc. That was the concept of the Supreme Being to our ancestors. So this is the first book published in the Philippines. It was in Baybayin, and it was published by the Spaniards because they brought paper and technology to produce books. And it's the Doctrina Christiana, 1593, and it's a catechism. It's a catechism. The first Spaniards in the Philippines were trying to quickly convert to Christianity, their new colonial subjects, and so they were producing books to help them evangelize. So up to 1625, there were still documents being produced in Baybayin. Unlike in Latin America, the Spanish colonial authorities in the Philippines did not teach common people Spanish. They learned our languages, which is lucky for us because I think a lot of indigenous languages in Latin America have disappeared. Because you go all over Latin America, except for Brazil, and almost everyone can speak Spanish. Whereas in the Philippines, because the Spanish colonial authorities and the missionaries, they all learned our local language, many of our local languages are still thriving. So I'm gonna jump a couple of centuries to the 19th century, because after a while, Baybayin was no longer practical for the Spanish, and because the writing system used in government and in schools was the Roman writing system, the native writing systems like Baybayin became obsolete. We're not used anymore. But when the first nationalists became active in the Philippines, they saw Baybayin as a necessary part of the new nation. So they studied it. See, these are some of our founders: Jose Rizal, T.H. Paradavera, Pedro Paterno. They were all intellectuals they all wrote about Baybayin. They all studied Baybayin. They all knew Baybayin. Bonifacio and Jacinto, they are the revolutionary leaders. Andres Bonifacio and Emilio Jacinto, they used it as iconic symbols of the revolution. In other words, Rizal, Paro Tavera, and Pedro Paterno theorized about Baybayin. Bonifacio and Jacinto marketed it. They put it on flags, they put it on letterheads, and they chose a name for the revolutionary movement that repeatedly used the Baybayin character Ka. Kataas-taasang kagalang-galang katipunan ng anak ng bayan. Or Ka. So Rizal even had a font. He wrote out the alphabet, and he has, Rizal in whatever language. Rizal also wrote beautiful German, but whatever language he wrote, whether it was Baybayin, Tagalog, English, Spanish, etc., he had beautiful handwriting. It's a beautiful font. So for the longest time, Filipinos spelled the Ka sound either with a C or with a Q. For example, kain, which means to eat, was for about 350 years spelled C-A-I-N. But the past tense, kinain, cannot be used with a C because that would be sinain. So how do you spell the past tense kinain in Roman during the Spanish period? You had to spell it Q-U-I-N-A-I-N, which made it unwieldy and made it. And Rizal actually was telling Blumentritt, his best friend, who's also German speaking. He was saying, and Blumentritt was a high school principal. He was saying it's made Tagalog writing and orthography so difficult to teach. So when Rizal studied Baybayin, he said, why don't we adopt the equivalent of Ka, which is K? And that's why we're using, and then in Noli Me Tangere, the novel of Rizal, which was published in 1887, the Tagalog there was no longer spelled with a C, it was spelled with a K. And all the more the Spanish hated him. Because not only was the Noli Me Tangere anti-friar, Rizal dropped the Spanish C and the Spanish Q and replaced that sound, those letters, with K. Rizal was thinking Baybayin, the Spanish were thinking German because the Germans used K. And in the 1880s, Spain and Germany did not like each other. So all the more that the Spaniards found reason to persecute Rizal, and eventually he was executed by the Spanish in 1896. All right, so just examples of how Ka was used. This is the Katipunan seal. You use Ka. That's the flag. So if we beat the Spanish, we defeated the Spanish in 1898, and then the Americans came. And they said, oh, forget your native writing system. Continue with the Roman writing system. And then they established a public school system all over the Philippines that kind of required everyone to use Rome. So it's kind of, the momentum stopped. But if the Americans did not arrive, we would all be reading and writing in Baybayin today, in addition to Roman. Like much of the rest of Asia, we would be toggling between our native writing system and the Roman writing system introduced by Europeans. All right, so now the modern era. So there's a lot of tokenism. It's used a lot more in art. The cultural center of the Philippines, that's, a lot of people think it's just a logo. This is just a design, but it's actually based on that Ka. It's 3 Ka. And remember, a cultural center was built during the time of Imelda Marcos, who popularized, the true, the good, and the beautiful. So those 3 Kas are katotohanan, kabutihan, kagandahan. And now there are young Filipinos who are trying to popularize calligraphy in Baybayin. There's street art in America by the diaspora Filipinos there. And this is one of the big proponents of Baybayin in America, si Christian Kabuay. There's a lot of tattoo art, as I mentioned earlier. There's Baybayin comics, manga style. But again, a lot of it is performative because our literacy in Baybayin is like 99.99% probably. It's not taught in schools. So we need to spread it in informal ways. If it's not taught in schools, again, this is in my house, and I invite groups of friends, and young people in the Philippines are always eager to learn. And that's my wife. So she's also proficient in Baybayin. So Baybayin, the age of chat, download. Oh, by the way, there are keyboard apps, and that makes it much easier. Here, I'll pass this around, and you can take a picture of it. It's on the App Store. It's on for Android. All right. That's what it looks like. That's the Android version. There's also Buhid Mangyan. That's the G board, the Google board. And we have, when I sit down and teach a group of people, I tell them, look, when you message me, you need to message me in Baybayin. If you don't message me in Baybayin, I'm not going to reply. Well, that's how you learn a language, right? When I was studying Spanish, even after like the first month, my Spanish teacher refused to speak to me in English. She was always talking to me in Spanish, and I had to reply in Spanish. That's how I learned quickly. So these are examples of chats. Cara David. I taught Cara David. She chats with me in Baybayin. We have a family chat group. It's all in Baybayin. So just to summarize, Baybayin's evolution is, it started out for poetry. Our ancestors were not writing, scientific literature in Baybayin. I mean, we were limited by the available technology, but we did have a writing system. And then in 17th century, there were legal documents. Then Rizal took it, used it as a symbol of nationalism, and then back to it's being used in art, design, logos, and then we can start messaging using the apps. And I think that's key, because we're no longer, when we're messaging using the keyboard apps, we're no longer just using Baybayin for design and art and just to, as kind of a performative tokenism, and to show that we're actually using it to communicate. And this is my notebook. I practice every day. There are many Baybayin Facebook pages if you want to meet other people who are interested, and if you want to practice. These are a list of resources if you want to read more. I can show you these later. And this is my family with our T-shirt says, "Maging mabuting ninuno, be good ancestors." Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. We now can open the floor for questions for Sir Howie.
Thank you so much for that eye-opening presentation. My name is Henry, and I would just like to ask, because I believe that there are also different scripts in the Philippines, for example, for Cebuano, Ilocano, but this one is based on Tagalog. Or I don't know if it's, but I don't know, what are the differences between, for example, Cebuano script with Ilocano and Tagalog scripts? So that's the question.
All right. Well, that's a great question. First of all, they're all related. They're all related. But we're a country of a lot of islands, so certain cultural practices can evolve in isolation from others. But about a thousand years ago, Indian traders were coming to the Philippines, introducing their writing system, and they were traveling all over the Philippines, introducing this writing, and they evolved independently. But they're all similar. They're all syllabaries, for example, and I can recognize some of the characters in other writing systems. But to answer one of your questions, is Baybayin just for Tagalogs? No, because Baybayin there are specimens of Baybayin found as far as Panay, Bantayan Island in Cebu, Masbate, Ticao Island, Monreal. I mean, there are specimens of Baybayin writing found from Ilocos all the way down to Cebu, Bantayan. So no known discoveries yet in Mindanao, but they had their own writing down there centuries ago. It was called Kawi, and then of course the Islamic missionaries came and taught Arabic. But I think it's a myth for some to say it's just a Tagalog. I hear this a lot. Oh, that's just a Tagalog thing. We Visayans have our own. True, it's called Badlit. Badlit is very similar to Baybayin. There are linguists who say we should call all the writing systems in the Philippines Baybayin because it's because the other writing systems are variations of the same writing system. However, because we're so regionalistic, you know, anytime something, anytime the Tagalogs want to introduce something, other ethnic groups, other regions often will resist, and I don't blame them because the Tagalogs have dominated, Philippine government and economy, culture for so long, and I totally understand the resentment, but it's led to some misconceptions about Baybayin, and I think Baybayin is much more national than what a lot of people think.
I have a silly question and a serious question. So my silly question is, when you use the keyboard, has it learned how to predictive text? And then my serious question, no, I mean, it learns,
It's not
right?
silly. I mean,
Does it do it? Yeah. And can you use swipe on the keyboard? This is just technical things. You've just persuaded me to adopt a new hobby. Um, and then the serious question is, should we be campaigning to have it taught in schools?
All right, the first question, I really don't know if it's predictive. I haven't tried. I have, I have to study that, I'm not really that technically skilled. I mean, there could be a way. It still has a lot of, there's still a lot that can be done technically with it. In fact, the keyboard itself has a few glitches. It can still be improved. Now, the second question, should we be campaigning? Um, Coincidentally, one of the Philippine delegates, or I don't know if he's a delegate, but he was wandering around. I saw him. He's the incoming education undersecretary in charge of curriculum, and I've been talking to him about it. I'm part of a discussion community with other Baybayin practitioners, including historians at UP. I think universities should be, I mean, I'm a journalist. My institution is not really backing me in this, but like this historian who's an expert, a real expert on Baybayin, Dr. Ian Alfonso, is a professor in the Department of History in the University of the Philippines, Diliman. And I've been telling him, we got to mobilize the university behind this effort because you're very influential. The thing is, there's so many priorities in the Philippines. This is not one of them. It's not one of them. It's enough for the government, for example, to just put it there, like Aklat Pilipinas downstairs, to put it there. But, well, in fairness, we're having this little discussion, so that's something. And then, the other day I had a workshop downstairs. So there's some effort, but the major effort would be making it part of the curriculum. Making it part, not just saying, because it's mentioned in history classes, but it's mentioned like, oh, when the Spaniards arrived, Filipinos were literate. And that's it. There was Baybayin, there was a writing system, and that's it. I mean, one day maybe teachers will be spending a month or two teaching the basics of Baybayin and letting the kids who are interested, become better at it and become and teach themselves how to be masters because it's not really that difficult. But if you, yeah, I mean, join the advocacy, Candy. I mean, you're an influencer yourself. Okay, there you go. I mean, wow. Okay, yeah. In the Philippines, I've been doing this for a long time, and nobody's really pitched a book to me. But at the book fair, people are like, "You should do a book. You should do." Maybe it's time. Yeah. Thank you.
Um, you mentioned earlier. Oh, yeah. You mentioned earlier there's a connection between Sanskrit script and Baybayin, and yet the core of Tagalog is not is not Indo-European in origin. There are loan words. Can you tell more about the transfer in the script between Sanskrit and Baybayin?
Well, there are no written records of that. You're right. I mean, we've had spoken languages much earlier than writing, right? I mean, spoken languages uh, came much earlier. I mean, probably with the dawn of human migration to the Philippines, because the original inhabitants came from other parts of the Pacific, and there was no writing, of course. And then the Indian traders came, and there's no certainty about even what century. But the earliest writing specimen in the Philippines is dated 900 A.D. That's the Laguna copper plate inscription, which is less similar to Baybayin than it is to Kawi, which is the writing system in Java. So it's actually evolved from. I think it evolved from that. But in terms of the actual, there's no written record. I heard a lecture here about the Indian traders who came. They were not unlike the Spaniards, the Spanish missionaries and explorers. They were backed by the monarchy. They came with soldiers. I mean, it was a very big force. The Indians came as individual traders and spiritual people, and there are no books. As I mentioned, the earliest book in the Philippines was published in 1593 by the Spaniards. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done to answer that question, but it's a good question. And there aren't enough researchers in the Philippines looking into this. It's really not a priority. I mean, the priority of historians in the Philippines is what people like Ambet Ocampo are working on, which is like 19th century. There are very, very few historians who are interested in history that goes way back because there's no paper. Historians love paper. They love documents. You go further back, they're archaeologists. But maybe we don't have enough archaeologists in the Philippines. Thank you.